Giannis's left calf. This is the first round playoff variable. And my question was to you is how dire of a situation is this for Milwaukee? Because obviously Giannis looks like he's not going to be available for maybe the start of the first round series against the Pacers. We talked about before, maybe the Pacers have a shot to upset them. Do you think this changes anything in your mind?
Not really. I don't think when you say existentially, that would mean like people asking out, ripping up the team from its roots. I don't think that's really on the line here. If the Bucks want to, and even Giannis himself, they can make a bunch of excuses for why things didn't go well this year. They hired the wrong coach. They got a guy in midstream. A very top-heavy team with a lot of injuries at the top towards the end of the season. When they've had their guys, they've been pretty damn good. Even any lineup data that you could look up would support that hypothesis or that theory of the Bucks season. So I don't think it's that existential, even despite guys like Stephen A. and the talking heads talking about Dame Lillard not being happy there. From what I heard, he's plenty happy. He's just dealing with like personal life issues. Everybody knows he's going through a divorce and is a brand new city and things that he's talked about openly in public. But I think the Bucks, as they stand, are pretty fine on solid ground. I think next year is when things start to get a little testy if things don't start looking right. But the way this year has unfolded and the unevenness of it, I don't believe that a hiccup in this first round again would be too dire.
It's obviously bad to not have one of the best players in the world.
Yeah.
It's good in a way because I do think it does give the Bucks a lot of cover for what's been a messy, messy season. Even the stretches that we've been encouraged by how they've played, there have been caveats to that. Mm-hmm. Even when you look at their roster at its best, there's elements of it that's like, okay, how would these guys hold up in a playoff series? Do they have the requisite depth? Do they have even the fifth starter that's going to be up to playoff snuff? I think Giannis being out and potentially that being the cause of losing, whether against the Pacers or later, it excuses a lot in terms of how a lot of people, even internally, would look at the success of this season. And that means something. It maybe is a foolish way to look at it. But I agree with what Woz was saying and ultimately the takeaway, which is the core of the team has been very good. And if you think you can trust those guys to be healthy enough in the future, I don't see any reason to revisit the premise here.
I think there are two questions here. First and foremost, does this change our outlook for this first round series? Do you guys still think the same thing where it's like probably Bucks, but let's see if Giannis plays?
I think the Pacers are going to win.
Ooh,
yeah,
wow!
I think the Pacers are going to win. So I think it would have been close and competitive with Giannis. Mm-hmm. And if he's missing potentially 2 games and soft tissue injuries, maybe even more, I'm very nervous about the Bucks' immediate prospects. So I don't know if I moved from one end to the other so much as I thought it was kind of a coin flip series to begin with, and now I'm definitely leaning Pacers.
What about you?
I thought it would be a long series. I still think that. I think the Bucks can still manage to steal this thing. If they end up, splitting the first 2 games and Giannis comes back in either 3 or 4, I think they could still be on solid foundation. But yeah, I think if this is more of a toss-up or coin flip, at this point, because if Giannis is absent, then I would have had it going into the series before Giannis's, leg injury.
I tend to agree more with Woz here. I think there is a little bit of a deja vu happening, though. There are some of the markers from last year with the Heat where Giannis isn't going to be there. And obviously, this team is way worse without Giannis than they were last year, even. I think the thing that gives me pause going forward beyond that, I tend to agree with you guys as well. If anything, this team needed continuity, right? They needed a coach for a full season. Yeah. They needed Dame and Giannis to get on the same page. And they'll have ostensibly maybe another player to throw in the mix here over the offseason. I believe they keep a draft pick via a first-round pick swap. So they'll have someone or be able to trade that for somebody else, right?
An exception candidate. There's going to be someone they can bring in. And they need guys as much as anything. So even one more role player would be meaningful for them.
Yes. The one thing that I'm worried, though, is when Brian Windhorst goes on Get Up and says things like, if they lose another first-round series, I'm not sure where Giannis is going to be. And maybe that's just idle speculation. Maybe that's informed just based on his thinking. But I do think last year it was pretty telling that Giannis came out and really put his foot to the Bucks' throat in a little bit and being like, get me some help here. Seems like he's very straightforward about his wants and desires. And I do wonder if it is another embarrassing sort of loss, is he going to do the same thing over and over again and maybe make this more of a dire situation than it looks?
If the Bucks hired Adrian Griffin on Giannis's basically recommendation, traded for Damian Lillard, who Giannis wanted, I would be shocked if he took that tact.
Well, you can look at it two ways, though. You can look at it as, yes, they've done everything he wanted. On the other hand, he's demanded everything, and maybe he'll just demand to leave when it didn't meet up to his standards.
I know other stars have done that. I don't think that's how Giannis is going to treat this. I don't think that's his plan.
And more importantly, he's got 5 years left on his deal. This is not so when KD gets traded to the Suns after what basically was 18 months of poison in Brooklyn's locker room, ownership and management were pretty fed up with the way things were going. They themselves wanted to move KD and Kyrie and just move on from all the things that were happening there. That's not the case in Milwaukee right now. So I think the idea that with 5 years left on his deal, the Bucks are just going to be like, yeah, Giannis, make our team wholly irrelevant and, useless for the foreseeable future. So that we can trade. Like, I don't see why they opt into that, even just because Giannis starts pissing and moaning. I think the Nets thing happened because ownership was behind a move as well. And I don't see why ownership and management were behind a move for Giannis at this point, this offseason. That doesn't make any sense to me.
We're also getting way ahead of ourselves. Like, I know we're going through variable paths here, but we're going, and even as someone who thinks the Pacers have a good shot to win this series, first, let's see how the Bucks do. Yeah. Then let's see what it looks like. Because I think there's different kinds of losses, right? There's losses that are wholly discouraging.
Yeah.
And there are losses that make it clear that if Giannis was healthy or healthier, this would look very different.
These are the variables, man. One way or another.
I just don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of Giannis asking out based on a reality that we don't know will manifest.
I'm not there.
So you wouldn't rebuild the team around Lou Dort, is what you're saying?
I would not rebuild the team.
Why Lou?
He's always sending people to Oklahoma. That's his thing. Lou Dort, Josh Giddey. Right.
Sure.
Maybe Isaiah Joe. That would be a sick rebuild.
The big three. The new
big three in Milwaukee.
Yeah. But I'm surprised. You are more bullish on the Pacers than I think we are.
I think I'm down on most of the Eastern Conference right now.
Sure.
Everyone is very banged up. And that's the thing, as we talk about the Celtics and their competition, there's not a lot of alternative options out there as you're navigating the East and figuring out who the other contenders could be. I wish Milwaukee had proven enough to make me feel confident in their chances, but they haven't. And the Pacers, if anything, I think have quietly kind of picked up some steam over the back part of the season. Like, their defense is looking a lot better. The rotation is a lot more balanced since they made the trade for Siakam, since they traded away Buddy Hield. Andrew Nembhard has been in that starting lineup. Like, I have visions of, what we saw of Dame in that final game against the Magic, just a horrid shooting display. He's going to be hounded by a really good guard perimeter defender in Nembhard for a lot of that series. And the Pacers aren't an amazing defensive team, but they're good enough to keep the Bucks without Giannis in check.